Yeah.
That's it.
The jog.
Dude,
We did a podcast. We did a podcast drunk. I'm normal now. Look at Perky. He's a Perky. We record the people talk. We record the people talk and they say things. And then we stop recording. And then, you get what I say?
it's been so long since I gotten you to do the drunk guy voice well.
Wax on! Wax up!
Film every podcast.
Kya, bitches!
I see you running down the hill. And then, and then you trip over a rock and you keep falling down. Film every podcast.
Bitches. Bitches. It hurts.
Okay, everybody, quiet on the set.
Film Every Podcast, take 7! Yeah!
And action. Hello, Film Reverie Podcast listeners. This is Michael Beckemeyer, and today I'm here with
Brad Kingston, as always.
And we actually have, we're really excited because we've already been talking for like 20 minutes because we have our special guest, our longtime friend, the other person I've known as long as you that I'm still friends with, Chris Bremer, a.k.a. C. Mansfield Bremer. All the way from Santa Barbara.
Hi guys, I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for telling everyone my middle name.
C. Mansfield Bremer.
It's a very English-sounding name. All the way from Santa Barbara, right? California?
That is correct. I'm currently in Santa Barbara.
Son of a bitch.
He jumped the Florida ship a long time ago and abandoned everyone.
He gets to be in California and be semi-successful, and we're still here doing pod craps.
Well, what do you mean we, white boy? I'm fine.
I'm the one who has all the equipment. You're just here.
So what's the weather like?
I like this idea of pod craps. I mean, that's interesting.
Pod craps.
I'm taking a pod crap right now.
The show has only been on for 90 seconds, and it's already gone to
It's going to shit, metaphorically and literally.
Chris Bremer and Brad, I'm actually sitting here with two people I've known for 20 years. We met each other in 95, right, Bremer?
It's probably more like 96 or 97.
Oh, so I've only known you for 18 years.
Yeah, I don't think I make the 20-year cut.
Yeah, when did you graduate college? Because you had just graduated college that summer when we met.
97.
Okay.
So, yeah, like August, probably.
I remember you were so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and everybody, and you were, at this, like, local film meeting. We won't say it.
FMPTA.
Yeah, the FMPTA. And you were passing out your resume like it was going to do you a bit of good.
Oh, God. That place was a black hole of success.
He was so eager about it, though. And I was like, oh, look at this guy. And at the time, I thought you were so much younger than me. But now I kind of feel like we're all the same age.
It's true.
Yeah.
Time does that.
Yeah.
Time ages us all equally.
And Chris Bremer has the luxury, the benefit of being the one person who has read every awful thing I've ever written.
I've read, okay.
Well, you have the benefit of having been sent those things, but you still haven't read anything.
I've read enough.
I've read enough to know it was bad.
I've read enough. That's the end of it.
Like the first two lines.
But he's like always been able to give me you've always been able to give me like really good feedback, like thoughtful, this is good or this is not good, like without like totally alienating your, me, which has been good. So thank you for being a diligent 18-year-long friend of putting up with like.
You just triggered like a memory that I want to recount for you.
Okay, good. Great.
When you wrote what was probably like your fourth screenplay, it was called Infinity.
Yeah.
And it was like 1,000 pages long.
It was 179 pages. Let's not exaggerate.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a 20-hour epic about, like in the vein of Magnolia or something.
But I will maintain it still was not as long as Infinity.
It was not infinite.
It was not.
But
Oh, I just got it. Whoa! High five.
I remember sitting in the back of a taxi cab going from Portland, Maine to Boston
You still didn't
with
finish it.
Mike McGuire and Robert Starling. And I guess I can say names on this and reveal identities and stuff. And our plane had been canceled out of Portland. This is August of 2001.
Wow.
And Robert was like, we need to get to our plane in Boston. Let's just rent a cab and drive like mad crazy from state to state with all this photo gear, because we've been up there, basically like researching a kayaking film.
Yeah.
And I sat in the back frantically scribbling down notes and reading your script and redlining it, while this taxi cab driver who desperately wanted a cigarette and had been driving in the car with us for hours through Boston traffic just wanted to stop and get a cigarette. And we had overloaded the car so much I thought it was going to flip over at any second on the highway.
So you had to get all that.
I want a cigarette.
You had to get all those notes written before you died.
I had to get the notes done before, yes. So I did it in this like frantic state. And then the guy was like, I just want a cigarette. Can I pull over? And Robert was like, no, because he was this rabid anti-smoker. Maybe this is the smoking episode, guys, since we talked about smoking twice.
Yeah.
But anyways, we screech into Boston Logan, fly out. And I'm like, I finished telling Mike what I thought about his script. And it was like more red ink than black.
I'm thinking thoughts in my mind. I just finished doing this.
Side note, I'm still working my way through those notes.
I was going to say, I was going to write you notes, but then it would have ended up being a totally different movie.
I did finally get that script down to like 150 pages just from removing all of the internal monologue thoughts, like the novelistic writing. It's still not the greatest thing. I've used different pieces of it in other scripts, though. It was sort of like a primer script for a lot of my other stuff.
Yeah, it was like the scenes you wrote in and of themselves were, I thought, were
long.
No, I mean there were moments of brilliance in the script.
Oh, thank you.
And so I mean that's when I really, because
this
I don't know.
More proof you haven't read the script.
I read the whole damn thing.
You said brilliance.
There were moments of brilliance.
Thoughts in that thing, man. It was not bad.
I said moments of brilliance, even if they were seconds.
Seconds.
A second's a moment.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm assuming the 30 people that are listening to this
Hey,
don't.
we're up to 31.
31. Oh. I'm assuming they don't know that we all worked. I mean, I think the first time we were all kind of met together was the apartment upstairs.
Yeah.
And Chris Bremer was the he was the
DP.
DP.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I'm not
the guy with the lights. You mean?
Yeah, the guy with the lights.
The dude with the lights who
You
knew
couldn't remember his name.
all this cool stuff, and he had this light meter too. I was like, oh wow, it's like in the movies where you do the thing, and I was like wanting to know how all that worked. So literally, I just watched Chris the whole time. Yeah. And I was trying to learn. It's like, oh, you could put a light outside when it's dark and make it look like sunlight. Wow!
He was the lighting guy / eye roller.
Oh,
yeah. He was looking at me like, you really shouldn't be directing right now. You don't know any. He was talking to me about color palettes and themes and this and that. I'm like, don't you like the script? We're going to go.
Just make it look good.
Look, it's all about the words, man. It's all about the words.
It's all about the words. We're hardcore.
But dude, that's when I had that, like, hey, well, I have ridiculously long hair right now because I'm in my hermit phase. But I had this really long hair. My beard was all nice and shaven and whatever. But you had me as some kind of guy that was like a equalizer or something.
Yeah. It was my like David Lynch ripoff, basically.
Oh.
And it wasn't a very good David Lynch ripoff, but so Bremer and I and you, we've all sort of like crossed paths and worked together, like pretty much. I mean, the only times Bremer hasn't worked on something that I worked on that I was directing.
Is when he's getting
when
paid.
When he moved and had like a regular job out in the real world. So, but he still has been like a consulting producer on a lot of my stuff because I'll send it to him and still get his thoughts on things. Anyway, but we're here today to talk about documentaries and documentary editing.
Oh.
And what a pain in the just royal pain in the ass that is.
Why?
Because, well, I mean, my theory on documentary editing is I love it, but it's more of a discovery because it's not like you have a script that's telling you this scene happens here and this scene happens here, and then you just kind of find out how each scene should be edited. In a documentary, there's literally an endless amount of like takes or
that's what I love
versions.
about it. It's almost like writing in pre-production.
And I kind of felt like when we were cutting our documentary Bremer, I kind of felt like we were
it's a fake documentary.
No, the Morris documentary.
Oh,
I kind of felt like it was sort of like a constant state of being unsure. Like you knew it when you saw it, but then you weren't quite sure if you liked it because you did it or if you liked it because it was the best version. Yeah. So, but you're working on the documentary right now, like basically the most epic thing any of us has ever worked on. You were shooting like this music documentary for tell us about it for I don't know for how long.
Mumsy.
I don't know how many hours of footage you had to dig through. You know, it's basically been your life's work.
It's up to 200 plus hours if you count the latest trip that some of the guys took to LA and we shot for what is a new project they have going on. It's even more than 200 hours. But the last time I actually sat down and calculated it, 200 hours of footage. And it started out as a short little featurette that was going to be on the DVD for another film I was making where these guys were just donating music. And I was like, hey, doing the producer thing, if you give me some of your music to use in the film, we'll do a little 10-minute documentary and put on the special features and call you out as like, the special guys in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, of course, cool. But in truth, it was sort of the music that I fell in love with even more than the other movies that we were making at the time. And that was in 2007.
You're 7 years, dude. You've been working on this for 7 years.
Yeah.
In retrospect.
And it never ended.
What's taken you so long? What is this, like Schenectady, New York?
I was thinking about this morning, and I was remembering something my mom said to me a long time ago when I was like young, struggling filmmaker and not having a real job of any kind and just doing freelance work of anything, so that I could write and have time to make movies. And that's how I ended up hanging out with you guys so much. She was like, why don't you just do it, before work and after work and on weekends and stuff? And I've been thinking about that this morning going, one of the reasons it's taking so long now is because for the last, 4 years, I've had quote unquote real jobs that I had to go to every day, at least 9 to 5 or more. And digging through 200 hours of footage, just think about it, just watching it one time, you actually have to spend 200 hours, right? I mean, that's many weeks of regular work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just to watch it. That's not even to like make a note about it or think about it or make a select. So editing is hugely time consuming. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing it all by myself for the most part.
See, that's the problem. If you don't have people that you can delegate to, then it becomes like this overwhelming gorilla of a thing.
And then you also end up getting to a stubborn place where it's like, no, I'm finishing this. And I'm finishing it despite all the people that won't help me on it.
Well, yeah, I started it out because I had helped, Mike, Brad, I'd helped you guys make a lot of films. I had helped my friend Aaron and John and Johnny Rice and just a lot of other people that I had spent my time helping make their films. And kind of by the time I got to this one, everybody had already like been through that. It's my first film process as a director, right? And once you've kind of directed something, you're either going to be like, I'm working on my next project, or I'm done and I'm burned out and I'm giving up. It's kind of like either one. So I kind of felt like I wanted to make my own project, and also felt like a lot of my compatriots were like off looking at their other things. Yeah. And I couldn't necessarily rely on them for the massive amounts of time. But anytime there was a shoot or I needed to like rally the troops for something that really needed a team effort, everybody was there for me. So Mike, you were there.
We all owed you big time because you'd been like a major like heartbeat player of everything else that we'd done. So they owed you big time, and if they didn't, that's kind of a dick move.
Exactly.
I mean, to say I felt obligated was like the least of my, emotions about it. Like I did feel obligated, but at the same time, how could I not? You had like literally handcrafted like many of the things like that I worked on because you were the technical brain for a long time. You like knew the technical stuff while I went to like Film School 101, which was making a couple of short films, Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so
that's how you learn, though, right? That you learn by doing, and
the
you
best
learn
way.
by making bad movies. And I think when we were younger, that's one mistake we probably didn't quite grasp is like, just do it, get it done.
Yeah, your first movie is supposed to suck.
Yeah, we were thinking, this is going to be so good.
Yeah, we're sitting there on our first film with burning a hole through someone's apartment wall because a light fell over on it going, we're going to win the Academy Award for this shit. Like, people don't even know who we are, and they don't even know what's about to hit them. This is so great, and Chris Bremer's coming in. There's the walls on fire. We got to throw some water on this over here. Okay.
We were filming. I remember that we had this one scene where I had to hit Morris in the head, and you had the brilliant idea because we couldn't. We had a special effects guy, or what is it? Not special effects. Is that special effects? Yeah.
Yeah.
He put
Practicals.
I think it was wax to look like there was a wound, and then he put blood on it. And the thing is, we couldn't make it to where.
Oh yeah, Bill McCoy. That was Bill McCoy, one of his people, right?
Jeez,
yeah. And we wanted it to where, I hit him on the head, and then the thing was there. So Mike had the brilliant idea. It's like we joke a lot of times, like film it upside down and out of focus.
Yeah.
But
because it's pretentiously artistic, yeah.
And you had the idea, you're like, oh, we'll film it in reverse. So we had to start with Morris making this like surprised face with his mouth wide open, and I had to start with the stick on his head, and then you're like, action, reverse, and then I pull it away, and then his face went from like, oh my god, I just got hit to, oh, everything's cool, in reverse.
In reverse.
And it just didn't work at all.
Oh man,
you couldn't make that work.
Please tell me nobody has a copy of that footage anywhere.
Yeah.
However, because of the Morris thing, I'd love to have it. But
I do have footage of the trailer.
Yeah. Awesome.
Which is good memories, good stuff.
Good memories.
That's about all that made it out of that film was the trailer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have some raw footage that we used in the Morris documentary, but the trailer is the only thing that we really finished.
Yeah,
if I recall.
Ultimately, in the scheme of things, we did not know that we were shooting our documentary like 10 years earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Because Morris had passed away. We talked about it before on this show. It's like a very close friend of ours, an actor, had sickle cell anemia and passed away. And honestly, the only footage we really had of him was of that really bad short film, our first attempt, like our film school, my film school at least, as directing. Ended up 10 years later being like what we had footage of Morris to put in the documentary we ended up making. So we just didn't know that we were like 10 years ahead of time on our little tribute doc.
That's right. And some of the behind the scenes like rehearsal stuff that we kept was ended up being some of the better performances than the actual movie.
Yeah.
We used those in the doc.
I was doc cam, by the way.
Proof that with my directing things were getting worse. Because in the rehearsals, everything was like, it seemed better. I think it wasn't really even the performances. It was like the way we were shooting it on set was like actually constricting people from getting good performances because it was so. It's going to be exactly like this. Nowadays, I've learned my lesson, and I try to. I keep things way more loose.
Yeah, we were really rigid.
Yeah,
I have a question.
12 takes of some dude opening a refrigerator. Like,
oh yeah.
I just want to make one point to bring it around. Then Brad can ask his question. Is that you asked one reason why it takes so long to cut and to do is like because in the documentary you have to wait for life to happen, and life happens in real time, right? So for the Morris documentary, you know, time had to pass. For the Mopsy documentary, or Voices in the Clouds and other projects, like, you just have to let people live and film them and come back every couple of months for years before you even really start editing and knowing what your story is going to be.
Yes.
The story that becomes your film.
So it's like it's like training a bonsai tree as opposed to planting a regular tree, because a regular tree will grow on its own, but a bonsai you have to like be diligent and patient and over years, you know.
No, I was just remembering, because we're talking about apartment upstairs, and then I have memories of all this stuff, but I just realized I was doc cam on like most of the stuff we did, and I guess it's because y'all weren't sure of, you know, where to put me or how I would fit in, and maybe I wasn't confident enough, but it was still, that was great to me, because then I could direct too, because I could direct by doing doc cam. And I just realized that all this footage, well, not all of it, but a lot of it was me recording all this stuff behind the scenes. And
so somewhere in there is a lot of really low angle footage of all of us making movies.
Exactly. We look like giants.
Why is this this looks more like a crotch cam.
B5O from action.
Oh, that's a really good point. Like, making a documentary of a production is like a really like important role in the process. It's like you get to have your own perspective and focus on what is the interesting bits of the filmmaking process. And it's not that we didn't know where to put you, Brad. It's that we trusted you with that.
Yes.
You know, and that's not something that you just, you know,
way to clean it up.
To sit there and hold a light or put a light up is one thing, but like,
way to clean it up. I like that.
To make us look good.
Yeah. Well,
it
I mean,
makes us look good.
Yeah.
It makes us look good, which was hard.
It was cool.
I was really overweight back then.
Yeah, that was okay. I was short and he was overweight. We don't know what was wrong with Bremer.
No, Bremer was the cool one. I know Bremer's never been the cool one, except for in our group of people.
He's always the coolest one.
That's what I'm saying. Like, in our group, he is.
As long as I'm hanging out with you guys, I'm awesome.
Exactly. We're the ugly chicks that make him look hot.
So what do you? So what is the? It's the people listening to this are got to be like, this is going to be an hour of inside jokes. I don't get it. So what do you say in terms of somebody who's been doing it now for a really long time, documentary editing? Because this isn't your first documentary. This is at least your third that I know of. Because there's the one we did, and then your Voices in the Clouds, and then the one you're working on now. What's the difference, the main difference between narrative editing and documentary editing? Narrative meaning fiction. I'll say fiction. Yeah. Fiction and nonfiction.
I think with documentary editing, you're constantly searching for the scene. You might go into a party or a concert or an event or even an interview, and you have a very loose concept of what you're trying to get. Like, there's a band playing, and I know I have to shoot the band, but while you're there, there's all different kinds of people meandering around and doing things and having conversations, and you're like a fly on the wall. So you go in with this idea that you need to shoot the band, and you walk out with what is 4 hours worth of footage, and you've got a 90-minute movie. So of that 4-hour piece of footage, only maybe 90 seconds is going to make it. So you have to go find that 90 seconds, but you don't even know what it is. So it's always about like hunting and searching, and you're gathering, and then you go through the footage hunting and searching for what the story could be. Where when you do a narrative piece, you sat down in a room with writers or a director or a small group of people and said, this is the story, and we're committing it to paper. And then you go through and say, we need a band, so let's go get a band and a stage and a room and a couple people to fill it, and let's just shoot the pieces we need to tell the story we already know we're going to tell. So then when you get to the editorial process, you've only got 15 minutes of footage, even though it may have taken you weeks to put it together. You get to cut this little tiny chunk and say, okay, boom, we're telling that moment in the story of a narrative film. So the process is really just reversed, right?
Yeah.
You spend all your time up front writing, crafting, analyzing, staging, or you just kind of appear, and then you edit real quick, or you just appear on a scene, shoot a ton of stuff, and go, okay, what did I do? And now you have to do the writing in the editing bay.
I have a question though, because I'm remembering back to all the times I was doing the documentary cam and camera dot cam. Anyways, I remembered because I when I started out, I have my personality type is melancholy, low self-esteem, and seriously,
no.
at the time
Never.
it was. In fact, I think that's why I was always doing stuff with you guys, because it's like I have to do this stuff, but I don't really have the confidence or whatever, the balls. And I found that, especially later on, that if I put a camera on, in front, I was gonna say on my shoulder, but cameras were smaller back then. I mean, they got really small. You could spend, $3,000 or less than $10,000 anyway. And I just could just go anywhere. Like, if I didn't have that camera and I was in those same places, I would feel so overwhelmed, and I'd be in a corner and, avoiding eye contact and, but I put the camera on and, it's amazing. Like, for example, a few years ago, I was, we were recording, I was working with a student of mine, Eddie Seslowski, I think his name is. And he got us some work. What do you call it? You know how high schools, they put on plays and stuff? Anyways, we were commissioned to tape the plays, but we wanted to do more than just tape the production on the day of the production. We wanted to do all this behind the scenes stuff because we were making money by selling DVDs. So we were thinking, well, extra features will really nail it, because then all the parents will, get to see their kids behind the scenes and all of that. So, I'm always doing .cam, it seems like. We figure out excuses to do it. But I guess because production is so fascinating to me, even though I know all this stuff, I still enjoy the behind the scenes stuff. But what I'm getting to is that, I'd be, as short as I am, in high school, I've got a beard. I look like a kid with a beard surrounded by, kids that are, I'm twice their age, but they're like twice my size, Not really twice, but, but I'm saying I go around there as if, like you said, fly on the wall. Yeah, I feel like I'm not there, and for some reason, it just becomes, I project that, and people just, they were doing things with, I'm standing there with the camera, and they're doing things that I'm pretty sure if they realized I was there, they wouldn't be doing that. And, I don't know. I guess I'm asking you, what is your experience with that? I mean, have you experienced that same phenomenon where all of a sudden you're like, you've got superpowers and you're invisible?
Yeah, you're like the master voyeur.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most interesting bits about taking pictures, whether you're a documentary or like you're just taking pictures at a party or an event or something, is like when you have a camera, people go, oh, like, of course you can come here. Of course you can, like, get past the security guard. Or, of course you can go behind the scenes into the green room. Or they tend to treat you a little bit differently. Yeah. Especially if you carry yourself sort of professionally, but easygoing enough to be, like, kind of disappear.
Right.
And when you're there and you find people that actually, like, relax – it can be really magical. And so you have to really know, okay, these are my friends, or these are people that I know, and they're finally letting their guard down, even though I've got a camera rolling and I'm looking at them right now.
And even though they don't know you.
Combination.
Yeah, you just touched on something else too. it's like, even though you do that invisible fly on the wall thing, also at the same time, it's like they don't know you, you don't know them, but all of a sudden, it's like your best friends. It's weird because I would ask them questions, and all of a sudden, everybody's like just on and performing, and it's like I'm one of the guys somehow, even, you know, and I can just drop in, be one of the guys, and then drop out, and I'm invisible again. It's weird, but it's cool.
I feel like the documentary filmmaker needs to be naturally inquisitive, like curious about a lot of things, or at least about the thing that they're making a documentary about. It's not necessarily capturing what's happening, because that's part of it too, but at the same time you have to be able to sort of nudge things and ask a question, you know, and say, so why is it important to you that you do this? And then it's that question right there that tells the story, not necessarily what was happening when you showed up with the camera.
Yeah.
And that's something that Bremer, actually, you, Chris, are just in general, as a human being, like somebody who is like a conversationalist, you're naturally good at. So I feel like you're doing docs have been really, like, you're well suited for it because of that, like naturally curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to learn, and I love to like study things and just, you know, sit back and observe, and I like to have interesting conversations about new stuff. Right. You know, it's like I always know the conversation's gone south when people start talking about the weather, and it's sort of like
that's how I started this podcast. What's the weather like out there?
Exactly. Episode 1, the weather. It's going to get more interesting from here. But I mean, you also like when I first started the Mopsy Project, it was in that hunt for music for the other film, which was also kind of this exploratory film. But I saw this band play down at the Social in Orlando, and they were playing music like from the 60s and 70s. And it was a diverse set. There was like guys that were literally in their 60s with long beards, looked like hippies, and guys that were like barely 21. And they were all playing music together in like a big ensemble piece. And I was like, this is something I've always been a fan of this music, but I've never seen it live. And it's not this like pop rock. It's not some Disney-esque kind of thing. The music and the people on stage, they had like a gravitational pull, you know, and some people just have that. They work on camera. They have that personality where they're not holding back. So as I started to explore it, it just became, you know, these people that would call me up and say, hey, we're going to do this, you know, this show, or we're going to have this rehearsal, or we're going on tour. Do you want to go? Do you want to come? And it got to the point where they were actually like calling me, and the film just started to evolve. We became friends. But we really never sat down and said, hey, we're going to make this documentary, or I'm going to make this documentary, until almost a year into the process. And then it sort of started to formalize. And like, I was like, I committed to doing, you know, a full-on feature film on this group of people. And specifically Jeff and his project that he called Mopsy, which just started out as himself. And eventually he took this solo project and tried to make it into a band. And he did make it into a band. And the story that evolved from that is how hard it is to actually pull people together to create music on a consistent basis. And I think after people watch the film, they'll understand like why it's so hard, why bands break up, you know, why they come together and then why they break up. And why something like the Rolling Stones or U2 or even the Beatles for 10 years are so amazing, because keeping those kind of creative forces in alignment for a long period of time is really, really hard. And it's really something special when they can stick it out for the long haul and continue to create something interesting. Even if you don't like their music, you can respect the fact that they're still together and still pulling together like interesting projects.
Yeah, I just want to clear things up. So, Mopsy, is that the name of the band?
Mopsy, yeah, Mumpsy, yeah,
Mopsy.
That's the name of the band. And so, you didn't know what it was going to be about when you started because it hadn't happened yet.
That's true.
At what point do you decide what, like, because you could shoot forever. Like, when do you decide what it's about? I mean, it's not like you set out to make an inconvenient truth and you knew what it was going to be about from the beginning. Or when Michael Moore makes whatever he calls a documentary.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Bowling for Columbine. Like, he knew what it was going to be about. But you are like, it's like an organism. It's a growing thing because it's about creative people.
Right. It's not like looking at, if you made a documentary about the Beatles today, you would go back and look at all this historical footage and you would interview them now and the people that are now, and it would all be reflective, right? They would all be reflecting back on, this is what happened and it was so jolly and great and beautiful, but fucked up, you know? I'm sorry, Mike, you have to bleep that. But, you know, and the whole thing is like a retrospect. But the film that I wanted to make was more about like what the Maisel brothers tend to do, when at least they were both living, and they would just go into a situation and observe and record and craft this story. So it becomes like an organism where it just takes life. And the band that I really started to follow was a band called the Heathens, and that's the band that originally I heard. And another group called Thomas Wind, which had some of the same kind of collaborators, the Wind brothers. It was this little pocket of creativity, and it was really that Jeff, who was behind Mopsy and was his stage name, like a year into it, that it really became obvious that he was the one that I got along with the best, and that his music was actually still alive, and he was really trying something, and I could kind of hook into that story arc of his process, where maybe the Heathens, had I been there 2 years earlier and watched them come together, that would have been the film. And they still have a big part of the film because they're kind of like
a prequel almost.
They're like a prequel, and it's kind of like the X-Men and the Wolverine movies, right? Like, you've got Wolverine, he's a character in the X-Men, but then he's got his own movies and he can support it. The Mopsy movie is almost like a offshoot of the Heathens universe. You know, for Orlando people that actually know and care about that piece of history.
Okay, so my next question is, how do you... Okay, so if you had been working on a feature film that was narrative for 7 years, it would be almost like an embarrassment. Like, you're still working on that? Like, you're not really working on it, are you? Like, what have you been doing all this time? But with a documentary, you're sort of like, yeah, I'm still working on it. You know, we just shot some footage a couple months ago, and I'm editing. There's 200 hours worth of footage. And so, but how do you, as a, you know, a busy human being, like a grown-up, like, not quit? You know what I mean? Like, it's such a daunting task, like overwhelming to look at all that footage. And what was the deciding factor that made you say, I have to make this, that I'm going to commit this much of my life to making this one thing?
Well, I wanted to make a movie where I didn't have to compromise. And one of the things that I felt like we always faced, Aaron and I always faced, Johnny and I always faced, is like, there was some piece of the story or the legal puzzle or, you know, just something where we had to compromise. I was like, I just want to make this film that speaks to me and I'm really passionate about. And so I just kind of like went for it and said, nothing's going to get in my way, and I'm not going to finish it until I'm really happy with it. And my friend who's a DP up in New York, he calls this type of process like the closet Kubrick. He's like, you sit there in your cave by yourself for like 25 years and never really release your film because it's never quite perfect. And so all 7 years, he said this to me like before I started Mopsy. So I always hear John Fordham's voice in the back of my head going, you know, don't sit there and be Kubrick about this thing. But there's a certain level that I wanted to be. Yeah. And having minimal collaborators helped with that. But all that being said, I had to wait for the end, and I thought the end had come a couple of times. In 2010 when I first moved to California, then Some of the guys in the band got married, and I thought, well, that would be a nice end cap to the story. And they'll release this album, and then this event happened with the Heathens, and I was like, I think this is actually the end. And really, once we got to that point, a few little shoots have happened as Jeff and some of his other projects have come in and out of California, or I've been there in Florida, and that's been interesting, and I've documented it for the sake of memories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think in 2012 is when I finally had a story arc that worked cinematically. And since then is really when the editing process started. So 2012 to 2014 is only a couple of years. And I did go through and log and like watch and cut scenes, and ironically, like a lot of those scenes I cut, I went back to and was like, oh yeah, I was on the right track. My instincts were correct, and I could use this 10-minute scene and then narrow it down to 3 minutes, and it works in the context of the film. But all that being said, I am kind of ready for it to be done and to move on to something else and just put a button on it and have my life back.
So is this just there's a rumor going around that this documentary is just an excuse for you to just keep shooting it.
Right. I just want to hang out with Jeff and Chris and Phil and all those guys and Waylon and just like, it's funny. One of the early scenes, I asked Jeff, like, why do you do this? And he's like, well, I've been playing drums since I was 9, and it's kind of like a craft for me. And, well, it gets me out of the house. And then he just laughs. And it's like, there's a certain amount of truth to that. Like, doing a project like this gets you out of the house and gets you doing things and meeting new people and experiencing life in a way that, a lot of people don't. And I loved that part of making the film. The editing part in some ways has been grueling, even though I love editing. But making the film and getting to go, different places, go up to New York or go to San Diego and just, take trips and go behind the scenes and show up at some, Hard Rock and be able to go backstage and all that type of stuff is like, it's fun. It gets you out of the house.
When you set out to make a documentary 7 years ago, you had no idea what was going to happen. Was the band going to stay together? Were they going to hit it big? Were they going to fall apart? Were they going to disperse into solo projects and maybe that's and into something else? Like, how do you adjust to the it's almost
changes,
like
you mean?
It's almost like a form of adapting to change without getting it's like when you direct a scene and you hire an actor and you hire like Joaquin Phoenix and you're like, that's not how I heard the words on the page, but it's not like Joaquin Phoenix is doing better than anything, but you sort of got to get away from your own idea of what the thing was going to be. How did you do that? Like, how do you stick? What's your advice on sticking with something, even though it's morphed into something that maybe you have less interest in making than you did when you first started out with your idea of what you thought it might be?
Yeah, of course, there was part of me that was like, the band is gonna become the next U2 or whatever, and and I can at least say that didn't exactly happen, but it took us in a very different direction. And what I learned from working on Voices in the Clouds, which is where we followed Tony Coolidge through his journey of rediscovering his indigenous heritage in Taiwan.
Yeah, I remember
that film took about 7 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
That took about 7 years?
It did.
Wow.
This is what they don't tell you when you start a documentary. If you're in school or reading a book or something, hey, plan for 7 to 10 years. Unless you're doing, we've got funding in 45 days and we're going to crank out a story about, the Rolling Stones and what it was like to be a Rolling Stones in the 60s. Something very specific. But if you're we're going to follow the Rolling Stones around on their tour for the next 2 years and make something from that film's going to take you 3 years, at least.
Yeah.
And if you have no money and no team like I did, it's going to take you 7.
So how did you stick with it without were you ever disappointed in what was happening and thought, maybe my documentary is just dead now, maybe it's dead?
Yeah.
How did you keep finding a way to make it a worthwhile effort?
To stay interested? How do you? Because I have that problem where I'll get bored of something because I've got like ADD and OCD and all that. But it's like, I'll get bored and then not be able to finish it, especially doing it by yourself when you don't have someone else that's like, hey, how's that going? Or, expecting something at a certain time. Yeah, I'm really curious because I've been wanting to ask that. How do you stick with something like that for 7 years and not just think, oh, I can't, I'm never going to finish this? How?
I have had those dark moments where I'm like, I'm just going to delete the whole hard drive. I'm going to delete all 4 terabytes of footage and walk away, I thought maybe my house will burn down and I just won't have to finish it because all my possessions, including the film, will be destroyed. And those were the darker moments, but it's hard. And there have been points where I don't know, let me use a real use data as an example, because I have this journal that I started. It's just like a little one of those kind of moleskin type things. Mm-hmm. I started taking notes in it. And I've been pretty consistent of always pulling this up. I've got an original note that I wrote up in May of 2011, May 6th. That's kind of when it seems like this thing started, around 2011. And that's probably when I really started logging footage and going through it. And it will jump. Let's look first, see if I can see a big gap. Because I know that there's points when it goes almost 6 months or a year.
Wow.
Here's 9/11/11. Then it goes to 11/8/11. And then it goes to December. I guess I was on a roll here. 4. There are definitely giant periods of time where I just didn't work on it. And if you look at it, it almost seems like I would come back to it every March and every June and every September.
Every 6 or 7 months, yeah.
Yeah, and you just have to walk away and go.
Yeah.
Perspective. Get some perspective.
Yeah, and watch it with fresh eyes.
That's the thing, because it's a living, breathing organism. Like anything really is. It's not like a script is. You could sit down and write a script. And ultimately, you can write a script and finish it today and then come back to it a week from now and have some ideas on it, but your perspective is still so freshly, what you intended was still so freshly in your mind. And that's a good thing because you want to remember your intent. What was I actually trying to say? But coming back 6 months later to something that you wrote 6 months ago and saying, oh, well, this is really a pile of shit. I should change this. And it's very clear now because you have so much more perspective and you're actually better at whatever it is you're working on, a better writer, better editor, or whatever, because you wrote that. It's not because it was bad, it's because you wrote that and you grew because of it. And you can come back later and get perspective.
Yeah. And when you were talking, it made me realize that maybe that's part of the process of this long thing where you take a step away, but then you come back and you'll watch some footage or something, or you'll rewatch what you've edited so far. And, I guess I'm kind of asking, is that part of what you do? Like you said, you look at it with fresh eyes. Does it kind of revigorate you when you go back and look at it and you're like, oh man, yeah, this is, you reconnect to what you were thinking and the passion?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to take that, give yourself that mental break. And then when you come back and you see it, it's like watching it more like the normal person who's just going to view the movie as best you can, and then go down that rabbit hole and spend 12 hours straight sitting at your computer, watching old scenes or revising a cut. And then go into bed exhausted can be, and waking up 6 hours later and drinking a cup of coffee and sitting back down for another 10 hours.
Because you've been thinking about it all night and when you woke up. And
yeah, I think it takes a lot of time in your life. And that's where, if I had kids, it might have been a lot harder. Because you can't just ignore them for 20 hours straight, right? So, and that's been kind of how I've gotten through it, is okay, I'm not going to make any plans this weekend. I have zero, commitments to anybody. until I have to be at work on Monday, and that's exactly how I want it, and I'm going to like dive in and just go. And you take a break in the middle to eat and like, maybe watch a movie just to relax your mind, to take a nap. But yeah, you just have to dig in. And it's hard when you can only feel like you have like an hour or two, because it's not really enough time to get into the zone.
Yeah, it's hard to even get started when you have that short amount of time.
Yeah, it takes 2 hours just to transition your mind into doing the work.
Yeah.
And it might take another 2 hours to remind yourself where you were, and then the next 6 hours you're highly productive. But for me, like, I definitely, if I wasn't really, really passionate about the subject, it would have never worked. Because even when I was shooting, I had nights that one of the guys would call me or text me and say, hey, we're going to do this thing. Like, you're on the guest list. Just come in if you want. And I had been working all day, and I was tired, and like I had a headache, and I had to get up early the next day. But this thing was only happening that one night. These people were only going to be together that one day. So I had to choose, am I making my film or not? And I would go, and it would be really tough. And at the end of the night, I was exhausted. But I was always glad I did it, even if I was glad I did it like years later, going, oh, man, I remember how shitty I felt then.
So, you're standing there looking at over 200 hours worth of footage. You're the only one working on it. For the most part, you're the only one that you've probably personally shot. It's 75, 80% of the footage all by yourself, right? At least, if not more than that.
No, I'd say that's probably like 80. It's probably
80,
like a good.
okay. 79%, 81%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
0.5.
I just know you have sat there looking at all that stuff and decided and come to the fear or the anxiety that I'm out of ideas. I don't know what to do with this. It's bigger than me. Like, it is wagging the dog and you're the dog. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you do when you are out of ideas? Like, you just don't even know what to do next because it's so daunting. It's so big. It's like a bottomless pit of like anxiety, creative anxiety.
Well, what I've done over the years, and Mike, you've been witness to this because you've probably seen more of the footage than anybody, but say I would take a scene, let's call it the San Diego scene, that represents probably like 7 minutes in the final film. About 2 years ago, I showed you like 45 minutes of a scene that could have been that part of the movie. Yeah. And you kind of, because I was sort of like, I don't know what this means. I've lost my way, and you gave me notes and said, this stood out to me, this jumped out. And Aaron gave me notes and John gave me notes. And so I would kind of like lob a big giant chunk of the film over to my collaborators and trusted companions and stuff. And that would help me go, okay, this thing that I really like, it may be good, it may be beautiful, or it may suck, but it's not important to the film. But these couple little pieces, every single person mentioned and stood out, and that helped me go, okay, that would give me clarity. I could take that and take that 45 minutes, and now I've only got 15 minutes. And the film, one thing I wanted to say is like, it started out as like about a 4-hour cut, and then I got down to that thing, was like, I love every moment of this 4 hours, but I can't have a 4-hour movie because it's not that interesting to the
But
common
honestly,
person.
cutting it down to 4 hours from 200, that's impressive. You know what I mean? It's like a feat in and of itself. You've now said this 4 hours is the 4 hours that represents all the good stuff that I've gotten in the past, whatever, Mm-hmm. So even that is like, what's the name of the mountain? The 5K, whatever. You climb to the top of the mountain.
Kilimanjaro?
No, that's just the top of the mountain. You like made it up to the top. That's what that feels like. And then you look up and you realize, oh, I'm just at like the the second. I'm not even halfway at this point. But it feels like an achievement. I know it had to. You probably took the rest of the day off. Oh, I'm down to 4 hours. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. Done. I'll be done with this thing in a few weeks. Now, that was like 18 months ago, or at least 12 months ago. And these last hurdles have been going from 4 hours to 3 hours. And that took like have a beer and sit down and just start chopping stuff out. And then watch the movie and see if you really miss the hour of footage that you just chopped out. And sometimes the answer is like, yeah, I really missed that one little moment. But a lot of times that moment's like 90 seconds. Yeah. So you can go get it back and stick it back in. But the other, the other large chunk, the other hour, you don't miss it at all. You still like it, but you don't miss it in the context of the film. And you have to be really open-minded. Just like if you're a writer-director doing a film like a narrative film, when an actor gets on stage, if the words don't ring true, you have to be open-minded to actually letting them say it in a way that is believable, even if it's not the words on the paper. And then when you get into the editing room, if you're going like, on the day, it really sounded like he believed it, but now none of these takes sound believable.
Yeah. Or the footage is out of focus.
Or the footage is out of focus. Yeah, you got to let it go. You got to make a movie that works. So I keep reminding myself that all the time. Like, you have to make a movie that works, even if it's not what you intended or thought it was going to be. So the hard part now is like going from 2 hours to 2 hours to an hour and 50 minutes. And now I'm like at an hour and 49 minutes.
Yeah.
And those last 10 minutes have been the hardest to cut because we're talking about 2 seconds here and 10 seconds there and 60 seconds there.
And it's like, if it's still in there at the 2 hour mark, it means you're really in love with it too. I mean, it's survived every other cut, from 200 down to 4, down to 3, down to 2, down to 149. It's, it's like really is like killing your babies. How are you doing it? Do you is it like one of those things what they tell you to advise you to do, that you turn around and then you turn your back to the mirror and then you turn around, you remove the first thing that catches your eye? Have you ever heard that piece of advice? They say if you're ever worried about being overdressed, what you do is you turn your back to the mirror and then you turn around and then you take off the first thing that catches your eye. And that doesn't mean your pants, Brad. You got to keep your pants on. We're talking about accessories.
Oh, okay. Like my glasses.
That's not an accessory.
I can't see.
So how are you doing it? Like, what is do you vote? Do you look at it and go, okay, well, I like this better than this, but I still have to cut something? Are you like being militant, like the documentary editing Nazi? You're just like saying, no, I've got to cut stuff. And I like this less than this. Boom. That's what goes.
Well, the thing that I've been doing for the past year at least is I have this little text file on my desktop, and it's called the Murch Rules. And we were talking about Walter Murch, like the famous editor, sound editor. And he wrote a whole book, which I have not read, but I would like to. But he did just publish his basic rules. And here's what he says. So I keep this up on my desktop while I'm editing all the time. And it just says, here's the order of importance in your story, whether it's documentary or narrative. Is number 1, it's emotion. Number 2, it's story. Number 3 is rhythm. Number 4 is eye trace, which means how does your eye follow the image from cut to cut. Number 5 is two-dimensional plane of the screen. And number 6 is the three-dimensional space of the action.
Can you explain the last two, just for people, because that's kind of like a mind's eye kind of thing. You have to visualize it.
Yeah, I think that the two-dimensional plane of the screen is that when you have you're looking at just one flat object, and when it cuts from one scene to the other, are you going from a wide shot to a wide shot or a wide shot to a close-up? And how does that affect your brain? And a lot of times when you go from wide shot to wide shot, it gets very it feels jarring for some reason. It's almost it's almost hard to explain why, but if you go watch a movie, oftentimes you move the camera and you move the size of the objects within the screen, like, a mountain or a person.
Yeah. Is that like the 3-dimensional part you're talking about?
I think that's how they layer flat on a actual, like, flat dimension of a screen, like the size of the objects to your eye. And it might be the color as well. It might be the shape. It doesn't have to be size. Side by side, cut for cut. Where 3-dimensional is like how they descend into the shot itself. So, you might have a shot where you have a close-up on a mountain and then it rack focuses to a flower in the foreground or a person.
Right. Okay.
So that becomes the 3-dimensional component.
Okay.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff right there.
Good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So from now on, when you're giving me editorial advice, I'll just say, "Are you Walter Murching me right now?"
Exactly.
And you'll be like, "Yep." But I'm glad that emotion is first, because as a writer and a director, as somebody who's like on the set working, that's what I'm thinking about most, is like, what's the most emotional version of this? And we're going to go with that first, or at least try. That's what we're trying to get to, you know.
With today's access to the technology, you can do a movie on your phone now and put it up on YouTube or whatever, and that's important. That emotion is number one, because if you don't know all this technical stuff and you're not, you just want to do it, if you know that, it needs to make me feel something, or, make me laugh or whatever. But, that's the number one thing is, and that's what's great about it. You can just go do it and just feel it. And like, I don't know why I like this shot, but it makes me feel good, and just put it together. And
it's like a tuning fork. Like when you see something that you really love, even when you're, it's harder to do when you're making it actually, but you see something that you didn't make, it strikes a tuning fork and you just feel it from head to toe, and you're like, that is working for me.
Yeah.
And that's what it's what I'm always trying to get to. Like, and it might not work for you. What worked for me might not work for you. I write a script or something and think, this works for me. This rings like that tuning fork, like that creative, like
Bing.
Perfect pitch in my head. And I can feel it all the way through, and that's how I know to stick with it. And I might have to change it later, tweak this and that and all that stuff, but if I'm in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
So how does a couple more questions, then we'll
I just want to say that the beginning of the movie, the first 12 minutes, I have cut and recut 24 times.
That's the hardest part, is figuring out how to start a documentary. That is for me, like when we did the one little one, and I'm actually about to start working on another one, I think, that I can't even really talk about right now. I think I may have mentioned it to you. I don't know. I mentioned it to one of you. But that's the scary part, is how do you start it? Like, how do you say, this is the world you're about to be witness to for the next 2 hours? Mm-hmm. And the tone
there's
of voice.
Things that you cut and you watch them stand alone. You're like, this is really interesting. This will work to start the movie. And then you put it at the beginning of the movie and you watch it and you're like, oh, no, it doesn't work at all.
It doesn't work at all. Yeah.
It works on its own, but it doesn't work in the context of the film.
That's the thing. How do you keep remolding it without losing energy? Without losing interest?
Yeah, but I know
how I did it. I just didn't want to quit. But
well, I kind of want to touch on that, because I kind of reminded me of, even though a lot of the documentary stuff that I made of what we were doing because a lot of the stuff we did in the past, didn't really, I want to say, it didn't really come to fruition the way we wanted, and then I've got all this footage that I worked on and edited, and I'm like, what do I do with this stuff? It'll probably end up, but I started making a documentary about filmmakers, trying to do what we're doing and what we're talking about now. Now that I think about it, I should start working on that again.
7 years in the making.
But I realized I kind of got the answer to the question you were asking about the beginning and talking about the beginning. Just in my experience, and believe it or not, like, you're bringing up memories. I was like, man, I can't believe I actually did stuff like this, and I know what they're talking about, and I've actually, done that. But to me, the answer is the people in the documentary or whatever it is, even if it's a behind the scenes thing, the people, the characters end up telling the story and starting it. Like, I'll watch all the footage and then have a mental note. Oh, that'd be great for the beginning. And then what she said there, that would be great for ending that specific part of the documentary. And then I make all these mental notes, and then I just kind of do a rough edit together on the timeline and the final cut. Yeah. And then I'll come back with all of that in mind, and then I'll just, like a puzzle piece, I might have 3 people that I thought would go good at the beginning, but then this one person has a great intro or whatever, and then someone else is kind of explaining what the documentary is about, or how, you know what I'm saying? It just kind of, it's like a little puzzle piece, and the people talking kind of end up, it makes itself, or writes itself, kind of. Does that make any sense?
It is exactly like putting a puzzle together, and you have all the pieces laying out in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it felt like to me. In fact, I think I probably even made that reference, like when we were cutting the thing. It's like, it feels like a Rubik's Cube or a puzzle box. Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't really have any intent or whatever in mind. You're just like, I think this will be good. It's kind of a feeling. And then as you put those pieces together in a rough edit, and then you play it, and then you're like, oh, yeah, that works for that. And then you might want to take something out or put it somewhere else. But it starts you start seeing it. You know what I'm saying? And it kind of puts itself together. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, that's the trick.
That's the trick.
Definitely the trick.
Yeah, puzzling it together is definitely like the key. You know, you have to just keep rearranging and going. Like, there's this one little moment where this one person says this one thing.
Yes.
And you think that entire scene needs to be in the movie, and you finally whittle it down to go, I really just need them to say that.
Right.
And you can find another place, even though in real life it happened 6 months apart or a year apart, or the context was different. The meaning in the film now has a higher value or a higher importance. So you just take that one little blip that you just happen to catch on that one day and stick it here, and now suddenly it all like connects. And you get the Rubik's Cube, like, oh, I just got a side and it's all red. I don't exactly know how I did it, but I did it.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like you're blowing my mind, because I thought documentaries were things that happened for real, the way they happened, and it was you're saying you're making stuff up. This is
because you cut away to the wide shot, and then you use what they said later on, but it goes with what they just said there at the beginning, and it just flows together.
You know, I'm kidding, right?
I know you're kidding, but I feel like an educational person.
I tell my students all the time that no matter what you're watching, none of it's real, and I'm not saying that it's not true. It's just not real. It has been worked on and tweaked and pushed and nudged into place.
That person did not say all that way
over
at that
again,
time. Yeah.
until it said what the filmmaker wanted it to say. Well, I thought documentaries were like nonfiction. Well, they are nonfiction, but you still only have an hour or two to tell a full person story. You have to compress.
I kind of have like this aha moment or something. But what we're talking about is when we talked about writing in the edit, we're basically saying what we want to say through other people. Like, this person said that, and this other person, and you put it together, and all of it together edited says what you're wanting to say. Yeah. That is so cool. We're brilliant.
So your other projects that you've worked on in your life that may or may not have been finished, or you've struggled to complete, like the couple projects that I've done, and I've done a couple of things that didn't get finished, and I know you have at least one that you worked on that we all kind of in a way worked on.
Yeah, I did doc cam again.
Yeah, but it was the one time ever that I personally was around when film was being.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun because
diamonds,
we were using film. Yeah. Right? What kind of film
16,
was it?
16 millimeter film.
It was called Diamonds.
What did you learn from? I won't call it a failure in the sense that you failed, but like it's a creative venture that did not complete. Is a lot of your diligence in finishing this because of that, or like you learned your lesson on what not to do on those times?
I don't know. You know what's funny is that I'm sitting here in my office where I've got my Mac Pro and all of my, computers and editing equipment and everything. And there's this black box. It's a where you hold files, like a little portable plastic filing cabinet you get at Staples or something. And it's been sitting by my Mac Pro for as long as I can remember. And or at least since I moved here into this particular apartment. And the other day, like a month ago, I was like, what? I've got stuff stacked on top of it. You get magazines and papers. And I went and looked, and I was like, what is in this black box? And what is it that I've actually keeping here? And I'm going to open it right now because it's still here.
Oh.
And I'll read.
An unveiling, except it's on audio.
I feel like Geraldo Rivera.
I know. It's like, what's behind the wall?
We are now opening.
Inside is a stack of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Kodak Vision 250D film cans that have been exposed, and it is diamonds.
And,
what I'm holding in my hand right now, I wish we could show it, are the 16 millimeter raw, unprocessed negative.
Unprocessed being the key word.
Have you still, there's a lot of that stuff that you still haven't been processed.
Yeah.
It says exposed 7/9 through 7/15/2000.
Dude, you got to get that processed before film is dead.
Yeah.
Before film is dead.
This, I have sat there.
They don't even know
so
what the
many
hell a
times,
16
I'm closing the
millimeter
box,
is. Yeah.
And thought I want to. I did process some of it. I processed one reel.
I remember. And you shot stuff in slow motion, and I was like 45 frames a second. That's so cool.
Woohoo! It's normally 30 or 24 in film.
Yeah.
I think with that project, I have sat there and gone, what am I going to do with it? Because I don't think it's going to look very good. I don't know it's going to sound very good. I don't know that I want to edit it. It's a film so dead, but obviously I can't quite let go of it.
No, man, it's because it's your thing, and it's unsatisfying to not finish something.
Dude,
and
I have to tell you guys right now because I'm having like a Kevin Smith moment or something, where I'm having that aha moment, like, dude, I know what I have to do with my free time now. I have to make that documentary that I started years ago.
15 years in the making.
Yeah, because now I so want to process that footage, if anything, just to...
I'm sure Bremer will let you pay for it, because that's one of the things that have been holding him back all these years.
What does it cost? How expensive is it?
I don't even know what it costs
probably
anymore.
about $1,200 worth of processing and transfer.
So you take that project over, and...
I will do that.
What were you going to do? You weren't going to cut it on film. You were going to... There was
transfer it to DV Cam,
Right, you were at Media 100 or something back before. No, Final Cut Pro was around then. Yeah.
Oh, see, that's another question. We have to reprocess
Final Cut
it?
was not around when we first started it, or if it was like Final Cut 1 and.
And you still hadn't been converted. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. I was not an understander or a believer yet.
Yeah, you weren't an early adapter of Final Cut Pro, but nowadays you're pretty good. You're pretty far ahead. Like honestly, man, when an app comes out, and I've not even heard of it, but Bremer is acting like he's read the whole thing. Well, you should be able to do this, and I'm like, how do you know that? He's like, I don't know. I read. Yeah, but it came out yesterday. I don't know. He's like literally one of the brainier people I know. Bremer is.
I think
for a long time it made me really lazy.
I think he just speaks more. Yeah. You know that he's brainier because he talks more. Yeah. But there are other people that are brainier, and they don't talk as much. They keep it to themselves.
Oh, you're talking about
because
yourself.
they think that they won't be understood.
You're projecting.
Oh.
So okay, so when's your deadline? What have you given yourself a deadline?
When are you going to finish Diamonds? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm going back to the.
That's what I'm trying to. Yeah.
By the way, that still is the one time I ever was around when film was being like on one of our projects.
Yeah,
when
we
film
were
was
like
being
just
shot.
like our jaws were dropped, and we're like, "What is Bremer doing now?"
And I gotta tell you, like back our younger selves, like me, I was like, "We're real filmmakers now. This is film.
You actually said that too.
Hardcore. We're real filmmakers now. There's
This is
film
real.
involved." 30 years later, not 30 years. Oh my God! Not please,
Oh,
please,
God.
not 30 years later. 15 years later? It was like, yeah, DSLR,
Yeah, DV cam.
DV.
The media's dead now.
Yeah. So, what's your deadline on like Mopsy? Have you given yourself like a drop dead? I'm gonna be done with it. Are you getting to the point where you're like, I'm gonna have to say I'm done?
I'm getting close. I am pushing to submit a cut to South by Southwest, which just opened up their 2015 submission process.
Right.
So I'm going to spend literally the rest of this weekend trying to craft a film that I want to show them. And I already made a commitment to myself that if Sunday comes or Monday morning and I'm like, this is not it, then I'm not going to send it.
Yeah.
South by Southwest, I think, would be a good forum. It's a music venue. It's a music-friendly festival. It's a music doc. It's truly a like kind of underground indie music doc. So I think the audience and the festival and all that's a good fit.
Yeah, I agree.
So it seems like this is the time, and I do think I'm really, really close. But there's that other part of you that goes, but yeah, if you don't get it right, you only get that one chance, right? You only get that one chance if you don't get it right. So, but no, I don't really have a hard drop deadline, but I got to finish it because I got to have my life back.
Yeah. I know. Like you miss.
And I got to move on to the next phase, and I'm not going to let it go because of Diamonds and other projects, but really too many other things that were, films are always hard to complete, and they're always hard to sell, and they're hard to get in front of people. And even though it's easier to make them, it's and easier to distribute them, it doesn't mean that people are going to watch them. So
I think something you said this struck me like as very true is they're easy to they're hard to finish, but they're easy to start. So many people don't realize what they're getting themselves into when they start working on something. And in many ways, like my failures, some of my creative failures are like, whatever you want to call them. I call them failures. Not that I feel like I failed, but they weren't completed, is because I underestimated how much work it was going to be. And I was not as good as being stubborn about finishing it at the very beginning. But it's because of those things that I am so much that way now.
Yeah, I think, and I was going to ask Chris kind of this question. It's kind of like we've learned those lessons now. So now when we start something, we plan it out in such a way that we know what it's going to take and how long it's going to be, and we schedule out our time, even if it's weekends or a couple hours a night, because we've made all those mistakes in the past. So we know I'm not going to start something unless I can finish it, and I'm going to get Brad and whoever else, and we're going to combine our efforts. We're going to do this, and we're going to have deadlines, and I think maybe it's a mental discipline and like just making that decision that I know how much work it's going to be. Pre-production, we do most of the work in pre-production.
I've never started something that took me 7 years to finish it. Like, I commend you on that one, Bremer.
Yeah,
like, seriously,
for real, dog.
I mean,
I still got to finish it, guys.
I know, but still, I mean, you're close.
Now,
You will at this point, because the light is not just at the end of the tunnel; like it's right in front of you. And I've turned into a binge writer because of my fear that I won't finish something that I started. Not fear, I guess, like my creative, like. It's like I got to write this now because in the past I hadn't finished things, so I'm going to just like barge through like a bull in a china shop, and I've done things like written a screenplay in 3 days.
Just real quick, I want to touch on because I just realized another thing we're kind of saying is that you need people that you can trust and lean on in the process. Because I heard y'all talking about, passing footage and getting notes, or passing a script and getting notes. Even though, Chris, you're talking about that you're doing most of the work yourself, you still a lot of times need other people in what we call a mastermind group.
Yeah, mastermind.
Even though you're doing most work, you still need other people to kind of help you keep going and let you know, okay, where am I at this point, and is this any good? And you can't do it all, the whole thing from cradle to grave. You cannot do it all yourself without someone to give you feedback or something, support you.
Yeah, because the mind that feeds on itself is undernourished.
Yeah, and maybe that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that's helped unblock me and get me, back in it, or even realize the good parts and bad parts of the film, is showing it to my girlfriend, sitting down with her and watching it, getting feedback from Mike, from a Vimeo share, and then having a discussion. One friend of mine who I trust a lot, he's like, dude, I couldn't get through the first 10 minutes because I just wasn't interested. And he's does selections on documentary film festivals. So he watches a lot of movies, and he was just being really honest.
That had to hurt.
But it also is it's probably the best note you could get from somebody is the first 10 minutes aren't working for me.
Yeah.
So so now you got to be like, okay, well, I got to look at this.
It sucked, but
but I was, rather than having him be pedantic about it and say something else, I was really happy. He just, he was like, show it to me again, and I know he'll give it a shot, and it'll grab him or it won't, and it may never grab him, but that doesn't mean it's a bad film.
Yeah.
It may never grab him, and it is a bad film. Hard to say.
And the thing is, you'll never know because you made it.
Yeah.
It's hard because you lose so much perspective once you, especially, and it's almost also the longer amount of time you spend inside of something, inside of a room, you come out and you've lost your perspective on that room, and you've been in the room for a really long time.
Yes.
And you lose objectivity the longer you live with something, the longer you're married to something. You know what I mean? And it's hard. It's something you've got to figure out a way around because you still have to make good stuff.
Yeah, I want to ask one last question, and we need to wrap this up.
Yeah.
I just, Chris, what have you learned from your past projects, like Diamonds that we talked about, that you've applied that experience to Mopsy? That what can you think of anything?
Sure. Two things I think that are big that really either I learned before I started or I learned during the process. And one is try to unbound yourself as much as possible. So whether that's, the scope of your film or the size of your film or
the fact that it's on film, that bounds you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Don't shoot on film if you can't afford it. Big mistake with Diamonds. With Mopsy, it was shoot on any format with any camera at any time, but make sure that the film itself and the story could support that. If it was awesome. A feature film, it would be hard to do that. And the other thing that I have learned really through making this is what you were saying is don't commit to something that you can't finish. If I would have thought in 2006, 2007, when I first started this, that I'd still be talking about it in 2014, I would have been like, I can't do that. I've often said to myself, I'm only the one dumb enough to take on some epic 200-hour plus documentary about a band,
Yeah, have you heard of a thing called a short film?
Right.
I mean, you did set out to make a short film, and then you got sucked into it. The black hole.
I totally got sucked into it. And there's no regrets there. I mean, it's a passion project, and it's something that I know I personally will always look back and reflect on and love. But I do think if I do another film in the future, it's going to be something that I have the right team and the right story and the right amount of time to dedicate towards finishing it rapidly. Because had this film come out 3 years ago, hard to say, but it might have had a better shot in the marketplace. A lot of music documentaries have popped up as a trend, and I've been watching that happen and going, man, did I miss the window? Was I on to something?
Yeah.
But because I couldn't execute fast enough,
Yes.
did I miss the cycle? You know,
I so know how that feels.
Well, now you're retro.
yeah,
You're retro
I don't know
cool.
if I want to be retro.
You're
but,
retro cool. Yeah, Bremer, I think we're all retro cool at this point. We're in our 40s, trying to still act like we're in our 30s.
I'm not.
Oh, you're not
yet.
40 yet. Oh, man, up years. I hate you now. I just reminded myself how much I hate you guys. You're both younger than me. We've been
You're a
talking,
spring chicken, Mike.
We've been
You're
talking,
not old till you're 60.
Yeah, 40 is the new 20. Yeah.
Aha.
Yeah. So that's it. Like you educated, you like brought the truth today, and thank you.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really had fun talking to you.
It's
been
almost
awesome.
it's so awkward having like a little more rigid conversation with you, because a conversation with Bremer can go from hey, what's up to like totally world this back down to what movies have you seen, all the way out to human psychology and back and forth. But we sort of stuck with like the movie creative part, and it was almost hard. I couldn't, didn't feel like a natural conversation. But since you moved out there, I've been proud of you and happy for you.
I've been jealous.
And jealous of you. And we love you like a brother, man.
I love you guys too.
So I guess congratulations, and we can't wait to see the final product.
Yeah. That's us. Chris, where do you want to give people contact on how to get a hold of you, like Twitter or Facebook or anything like that? Or are you still remaining an anonymous?
No, I mean, my Twitter handle is just @Bremer, and I don't do a whole lot with it. But as the film ramps up, I definitely will start communicating that way a little bit more. You'll also notice that a lot of people from Malaysia or someplace like that have a Bremer beer garden will tag it. So you'll probably see a lot of weird stuff in there. And there will be a Vimeo page, Mike. When that stuff is like more final and the film's, more public, whether it's YouTube or Vimeo or, in fact, actually, no, let me start again. I do have something. It's called the mopsymovie.com.
Aha.
And that's going to redirect to whatever site is live, whether it's Vimeo or YouTube. So,
right.
The mopsymovie.com.
But not right now.
I think it goes to the Mopsy YouTube channel, where I've been putting up little clips here and there over the years.
I'll put that in the show notes for everybody.
Cool.
So, but if you want to get in touch with us, we are at Film Reverie, REVERIE on Twitter. And if you want to send us an email, it is filmreveriepodcast@gmail.com. And like we've been saying, we started a call-in line so that you can call and leave us a voicemail, ask us a question, start a conversation, whatever you would like to do. It is 321-804-3271. And that's it. We're done for now. This felt like an epic episode.
Oh, yes. My ass hurts.
I forgot to give Brad the comfortable chair. And
Nice.
We've now just had our longest recording session.
Oh,
He's been
seriously.
sitting on a brick. And I've had the nice cushy office chair that I always sit in. Anyway, so Bremer, like I said, good luck, man. We miss you. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. It's great
Wish you guys
talking with
too.
you.
And have a good Saturday out there in sunny California, you bastard.
Thanks.
All right.
I'll talk to you guys later.
All right,
All
see
right.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Film Reverie is a production of Broken Sunset Films, LLC. It was created and is produced under a Creative Commons license by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. Copyright Broken Sunset Films, LLC, 2014. I want Chris Bremer to hear something. We hired a producer to
Professionally record.
make a theme song for us, and here it is. You want to hear it?
Yeah, totally.
The Film Reverie Podcast is a production of Broken Sunset Films. It was created and is produced by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. The Film Reverie Podcast. The podcast is a production of Broken Sunset Films. It was created and is produced by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. The Film Reverie Podcast is a production of Broken Sunset Films. It was created and is produced by Michael Beckemeyer and Bradley Kingston. The Film Reverie Podcast is made for people. The Film Reverie Podcast is a production.
The funniest thing is Chris is trying to take it seriously because he can't tell if we're kidding or not.
I'm like, oh.
It sounds like a song